Today, I'm answering a question that might get a little personal. We're talking about sweaty feet. But it's actually a great question because it gets to the heart of how we feel about our bodies. Okay, so here's the question. It seems everyone is obsessed with deodorant all over their bodies. Do I need foot deodorant when I hike? Do you wear foot deodorant? That's a good question because it really makes us stop and think, why are we so scared of foot sweat? I believe I'm even talking about this. Is it because sweat smells? Because it does. And that's where deodorants and antiperspirants come into play. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you this if you're a grown-up who's been wearing deodorant underneath your armpits since you were 12 years old. But yeah, we try to cover up and conceal sweat without realizing that sweat is actually a good thing. Our bodies are amazing, and sweat is crucial. And sweat is a crucial part of how we function. It helps us regulate our body temperature. It helps us get rid of waste. Prevents us from overheating, especially when we're out on the trail. It is a vital and natural process. So while I'm all about trying to not have sweaty armpits when I'm at work or when I'm in close quarters with other people, just out of respect, I typically don't wear deodorant or antiperspirant on the trail. I know, shocking. I just don't see the point. I'd rather sweat, let my body do its thing, and then grab a dude wipe or a washcloth with clean water and give myself a little bath to get rid of the funk after the hike until I can take a shower. Now, feet can be a different story because we keep our feet locked up in shoes and boots when we're hiking. And when they're enclosed in shoes, it really creates a prime environment for several issues. I have super sweaty hands and feet. I always have. I think there's a medical condition for it. I think I have it, but I don't know. So I feel like I'm qualified to talk about foot sweat because I always have sweaty feet. And the problem with sweaty feet, especially sweaty feet when you're out in the backcountry, is your foot gets wet, your socks get wet, your shoes get wet, or your boots get wet. And it is a really amazing breeding ground for bacteria and fungi. And this can cause problems like athlete's foot. It can also contribute significantly to blisters. And frankly, it just sucks to have wet feet, whether that moisture is coming from your own foot that is sweating inside your shoe or your boot, or water that's coming from a puddle on the trail, or because you've had to cross a creek or whatever. I just don't like having wet feet. While foot deodorant may make your foot not stink as much, it's really just masking odor. It's not actually going to wipe out the bacteria that is growing on your stinky feet or prevent other issues that come from persistent dampness. We need a more proactive approach here. My foot care strategy on hikes actually goes back to everything that I learned in the Army as the world's worst Army officer about taking care of my feet. I learned when I was a soldier, your feet are everything. And the core principle is to keep your feet dry. So there are 3 things that I do or that I try to do on longer hikes. The first one is I try to air out my feet as much as possible. So that means that every time I take a break, I try to unlace my shoes or my boots, pull my foot out and air my foot out. If my socks are pretty wet and sweaty and they're not gonna dry out before I wanna start hiking again, then I'll just put on a clean, dry pair of socks. What I typically like to do, and this is a little weird, so you can judge me in the comments below, but what I like to do is just carry an extra pair of hiking socks in my backpack, and then when I switch out my socks, I put the damp, sweaty socks on the outside of my backpack with just a little safety pin, so they just kind of hang off my backpack, and it looks really silly, but then I can rotate them when the socks that I'm currently wearing get wet. Does that make sense? It's weird. I mostly do that when I'm backpacking and gonna be out for several days. And when it comes to socks, it's important to invest. Spend a lot of money on really good socks. Your feet are gonna thank you for this. Invest in a good quality pair of merino wool socks. I used to like smart wool socks, then I liked darn tough socks, then I went through a Bombas phase, then I went through a farm to feet phase. My latest sock phase is Injinji toe socks. They're merino wool toe socks because I've been getting some blisters in between my toes. And so lately I've been trying out Injinji toe socks, and I think that that's the sock I'm going to use on Kilimanjaro. So it's also important to play around with your socks and figure out what feels best on your foot and what wicks away moisture the best. And then your shoes too. I always think about your shoes and your socks as a system. Someone popped in on a comment once and told me that I was dumb for thinking about my shoes and socks as a system, but if that makes me dumb, then cool. I think about my shoes and socks as a system because they need to work together to support my foot and to keep my foot happy and healthy on these long hikes. So you've stopped, you've changed your socks, you've put on dry socks, you've aired your feet out a little bit. If you're backpacking or on a longer trip, like say Kilimanjaro or the Salcantay Trail in Peru, or West Highland Way like we're going to do in 2026, or Tour de Mont Blanc, some of these big these big mileage hikes, it's important to dry your boot or your shoe out overnight if your feet are super sweaty or if they get wet in general. I like to just pull the insole out of my shoe or my boot and just let the insole air out overnight and then put a dry insole back into my shoe or my boot. It's just something little, but I found that it makes a really big difference in having a dry pair of shoes the next day. And if you're doing like a bunch of day hikes from your house or whatever, and you can bring a different pair of boots or and you can bring a different pair of shoes or boots, I try to alternate every other day with one pair of shoes or one pair of boots. This just allows your shoes or your boots a little bit longer of time to dry out. In the Army, that's what I did. I had 2 pairs of combat boots and I had a little knot in the shoelace of one pair, and then I just alternated and switched every day so that my boots could dry out entirely. That was super important when I was deployed to Iraq. I don't do that so much with hiking boots now because I really only hike in one pair of boots, but I do that with my running shoes because they tend to get pretty sweaty every day with the amount of mileage that I'm putting on them to get ready for Kilimanjaro. Some people might ask whether or not it's good to use a foot powder and put a little bit of powder on your foot to keep your foot dry. I did that a bunch in the Army, but I don't do that anymore. I just don't find it necessary with a good pair of merino wool socks, especially now taking the time to stop and change into dry socks when I need to. So yeah, I'm not like anti-foot powder, but it's just not something that I personally use. So I think I've made a pretty good case against foot deodorant, but I'm curious, if you use foot deodorant, what kind of results do you get from the foot deodorant? Does it keep everything dry and healthy? Does it even work? Do you even sweat the deodorant off? I have so many questions. Maybe I'll buy some foot deodorant and give it a try. I have so many questions about using foot deodorant. In my mind, it just seems like a gigantic waste of money, but also I've never used it. So maybe I'm missing out on something amazing. And if you think that's the case, let me know in the comments below. And if you have a question that you want me to answer right here on the show on Wednesdays, head to our website, hikelikewoman.com. You'll see a little Ask a Question tab at the top of our website. Fill out that form and I will answer your question right here on the show. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time.